Good evening. Hello. Welcome to the Kundalini Code. Hi, Abs. Hi, Kirsten, Tracy. Nice to see you guys. So, it's Sunday, 6 p.m. UK time. And this is the Kundalini Code, where we talk about all sorts of subject to do with the Kundalini system. Good evening, Dominique. How you doing? Hi, Kirsten. How's it going? So, for anybody who is new here, this is the Kundalini system, the Kundalini Code, and we talk about all matters Kundalini. The Kundalini system is a system in the energy body. Hello, Tula. Nice to see you. The Kundalini system is a system in the energy body. The human energy body is a system of emotional intelligence. And it evolves over many, many incarnations, many, many lifetimes. That's what spiritual evolution is all about. Good evening, Hayes. Moonlight. Hello, how you doing? And the Kundalini system is what gives emotional intelligence to humans, and it's what allows humans to spiritually evolve through the journey towards self-realization. And when the Kundalini system is ready, it awakens, it activates, it awakens. And that is what allows the process of self-realization to actually happen. So you could say that the Kundalini system is the physiology behind self-realization. So this is a place where we can talk about the Kundalini system. And if you guys have had Kundalini awakenings or are going through this process, then please do share your experiences. And hopefully we can offer some Kundalini education as well. Because it's very important that people learn about the Kundalini system, because, first of all, because it's very complicated and it's a very important subject. You could say it's one of the most important subjects in the universe, because self-realization is the purpose of the universe. But there's also some things that can actually go wrong sometimes with Kundalini, because it's becoming very popular, isn't it? Kundalini is almost going mainstream. And things can go wrong with it because you can force it. If you're not careful, if you're not ready for it, they're very powerful energies that can kick off inside of you and cause you problems. So it's very important that people learn about Kundalini, learn what to do, what not to do, to make informed, educated decisions about what spiritual practice they do. Hayes, hi. When did you ascend and how has it changed you? Well, I don't tend to talk much about myself, to be honest with you, but how has it changed you? Well, I would say that Kundalini awakening and then the subsequent cycles of self-realization changes you in, saying that it changes you is an understatement. It changes you in all the ways that you could possibly imagine, while remaining the same soul, remaining the same person. Because the you that you think you are is a false you. It's a false self. The egoic identity, the personality in the mind, the psychological structure of the personality is a false identity. So that's the you that you think you are at the beginning. But then when you go through Kundalini awakening, that all falls apart. And you realize that that's not you. And you go through a period of time where you're not sure what is you. But then the true identity starts coming through. And you turn into a different you. I mean, it's completely different. It's not even on the same, it's not on the same page, not in the same book, it's not in the same world. you go from a psychological structure in the mind to infinite, peaceful, universal awareness, which is everywhere and nowhere. So, you know, the transition from one to the other is just, it's almost impossible to describe, I would have to say. So I guess that's the answer I'd give. I knew when my Kundalini awakening began. Will I know when it's done in my head? Well, that is something that you can actually find out for yourself. You can follow your progress through the Kundalini awakening phase and through the subsequent cycles of self-realization. There are certain milestones and markers that you can pick up on. So if you knew when your Kundalini awakening began, then yes, there is a systematic approach that you can take to this. You find where your K1 energy is. K1 energy is the one which goes up the spine through the major chakras. You find that through chakra breathing. And you find where it's stuck and you unblock it along the way. And then there's an energy K2 that comes down from the 9th chakra. And you can figure out where that is as well. And then there's an energy which moves in section 3 from the crown chakra to the Bindu. And yes, you can measure that as well. So there is a systematic approach that you can actually follow to find where you are. And the Kundalini awakening phase can take any length of time. You've just got to trace your way through it and help it happen once the Kundalini has awakened. Hi, Dominique. Should I do breath work to get rid of the fear? Will I have to feel the fear? Well, Dominique, you are in the cycles of self-realization, which is after the Kundalini awakening phase. Now, the thing is, when you go into that phase or those cycles, is that there's no more control. There's nothing more that you can really do. And breath work is not actually going to help get rid of that fear that you're talking about, because it's part of your process at that point. It's not a blockage that's causing that, and it's not directly karma which is causing that either now. Indirectly, it is karma. It's karmic debt. And we talked about that quite a few times, haven't we? The fact that the remaining karma that you have left as you go into a Kundalini awakening, it gets wiped out, but then it creates a karmic debt and creates the negative cycle of self-realization, which is the first cycle, and then the positive cycle, which comes after that, and then the unification cycle, which comes after that. So the fear that you're talking about is down to your particular process and your higher mind to decide. There's nothing you can do now to actually remove it or make it go quicker, I'm afraid. It's something that you have to surrender to. Now, the surrendering is a big part of the cycles of self-realization. Anything that you don't have direct control over, you have to accept. So even if it comes down to things like negative emotions, if you are being subjected to that fear by your higher mind, then you have to surrender to that fear and accept it. And the quicker you do that, the easier it will be. But that is the process. That is the process of the negative cycle, I'm afraid. Why does everyone say it's demonic? Well, so Kundalini you're talking about there, yeah? So I wouldn't say that everybody is saying that, of course, but a certain subset of the population may call it demonic, yes. And that comes from fear, mostly, to be honest with you. And certain religions one in particular, may call it demonic, especially. But that's generally down to fear, and then also calling anything which is outside of that religion demonic, as in the enemy, anything that doesn't comply with that religion. But that's all. But technically speaking, it's all fear-based, really. Peril, hi. When one is fully realized, the cycle of reincarnation ends. And when it ends, then what? Good question. So when you go through a Kundalini awakening, it means your soul has been through so many incarnations already and gone through all the journey of spiritual evolution that it's got rid of all its karma, basically. Or at least it's got its karma down to a very tiny amount and perfectly balanced, because that's the whole point. You need to balance your karma, positive and negative. You have to balance the duality. And then you're ready for a Kundalini awakening. But that takes so many incarnations of spiritual evolution for that soul. And then when you get to the point of Kundalini awakening, you go into an incarnation and your higher mind, your soul has decided, right, this is the lifetime that we're going to go through self-realization. You have the Kundalini awakening and you get through that phase, Kundalini awakening phase, and then you start the cycles of self-realization, which is the real transformation process. And yes, after that, there is no more reincarnation. Your soul goes through an energetic transformation, which means that the anatomy completely changes. The energy anatomy completely changes. You can't reincarnate anyway, because you would only reincarnate to get rid of karma, because karma is an energetic substance which is a transport system for emotional memory. And you have to incarnate into a lower mind and material body to actually burn off your karma. So that's why you have to keep reincarnating as a soul. So after self-realization, there is no more reincarnation. But what happens after that? Well, you carry on existing as a self-realized being. And we call that an avatar. And the astral dimensions are full of avatars who have finished their reincarnation, whether they're from this planet or from other planets. Not that they necessarily have reincarnation on other planets, but self-realization exists on all of the planets in the universe that have intelligent life on, that are going through the same journey. So the life of an avatar carries on in the astral dimensions for a long time. And this is what sparked off all the early myths and legends about angels and angelic beings and all things like that. How do I find what's my purpose? Well, that depends on where you are in your journey of spiritual evolution. So a purpose can mean various things. But I guess you're talking about the higher purpose that comes along as you go through a Kundalini awakening, I guess. Because otherwise, the purpose is to get to Kundalini awakening. The purpose, all the way through all those incarnations of spiritual evolution, the purpose of life is to get to self-realization. That is the purpose of the universe. That's why life exists. In fact, that's why the universe exists. That's why there is existence itself, for the purpose of the universe, or the source of the universe, to know itself. That is the purpose. So if you are in the journey of spiritual evolution, going towards incarnation after incarnation, going towards that goal, then that is always the purpose from a soul's point of view, of course. Now, if you're going through Kundalini awakening, the lower mind tends to lose purpose because the egoic identity is falling apart and the false self is dissolving, is disappearing. And you tend to have these feelings of losing your purpose or losing meaning, or you don't know who you are anymore, or you don't know where you're going in life. It's very disorientating sometimes. Now, that's just the false identity dissolving, making way for the true self, which becomes evident, which is pure and peaceful awareness, which then grows into universal awareness. So that is the only purpose. However, sometimes we say at some point in the journey, a higher purpose comes down to you. And it comes from the ninth chakra, which is the source of the universe, comes down into the system. And it delivers to you your higher purpose. We call it Akashic intuition. And then it starts to dictate all of your actions. And your higher purpose will then be something to do with helping other people on the journey towards self-realization. So as somebody goes through Kundalini awakening and self-realization, their higher purpose will come to them, and it will always be something to do with that. And at the moment, where people are becoming self-realized at this time in history, it's all about the global awakening. So how do I find what's my higher purpose? Now, if you're going through Kundalini awakening, your higher purpose will come when it's ready. So it's important to have patience. If you're not going through a Kundalini awakening, then your purpose is to get to that point. Not through trying to activate it, not through doing Kundalini yoga, not through going to a practitioner or a center to get your Kundalini activated. No, through dedicated spiritual practice, moral living, and self-healing techniques, pointing yourself towards self-realization. And the Kundalini awakening will happen when you're ready, You mentioned this period of not knowing who you are. Any tips on getting through this? Well, I guess educating yourself is probably the best way, because, educating yourself so you know what's happening. That's the first thing. The more knowledge you have about the subject and what you're going through, the easier it becomes. Because even if it's difficult in the moment, you can still look back at the bigger picture and go, it's okay, I know what's happening. You don't have to panic. You don't have to think you're losing your mind or anything, even though you are, in a way. That's one thing. The next thing is to shorten the time frame of the Kundalini awakening phase. Now, we are big advocates on leaving the Kundalini system alone. Never try and awaken it manually. However, when you have had a Kundalini awakening, and you know you have, there are certain things that you can do to help it along quicker and to not prolong the Kundalini awakening phase. So things like chakra breathing on your chakras to open the blockages, to allow that K1 energy to pass. This is, this section here causes all sorts of trouble. The section along the central spinal channel, where the K1 energy has to go through all the emotion chakras from the root up to the throat, all those blockages there, that takes a long time sometimes, especially if somebody doesn't know what's happening. So knowing what's going on, unblocking your chakras, that will make it go quicker. And the identity, losing your way through this happens as that K1 energy goes up through those emotion chakras, because the blockages are symbols of or results of the false self, or the conditioning patterns in the mind, creating those blockages in the emotion chakras. So the ego is built in these chakras, especially the lower chakras, the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus. So when the K1 energy passes through these and the blockages get dissolved, then also the egoic identity is dissolving as well. So the quicker you can do that, the better, and get on with the next phase, basically. And then section 3, the last section, where K3 is moving from the crown chakra to the bindu, that is also a difficult one. You've got to get through that as quickly as possible, but there's some exercises that you can do to help that. So that's what I'd say: knowledge, and also do things to quicken it up. My awakening phase is over, but my heart randomly pounds hard. Can heart chakra open too much? No, the heart chakra can't open too much, don't worry. But heart palpitations are a Kundalini symptom. But however, I really should say, if you got any strange symptoms like that, always get yourself checked out. Always go material body root first. Okay, so we have to say that for sure, because sometimes these symptoms can be similar to other medical conditions that can come along. So it's very important, always rule something out in the material body before assuming that it's some sort of energy sensation or symptom or Kundalini symptom. But yes, heart palpitations are a Kundalini symptom, and you can't open your heart chakra too much. No, not at all. And it's not going to be the heart chakra that causes that heart palpitation. It's the nervous system overload that causes these heart palpitations, because the nervous system is hooked right into the Kundalini system, or should I say it the other way around, really. But as you go through a Kundalini awakening, you get all sorts of strange nervous system symptoms, and heart palpitations is included there. What's in the health? How you doing? All right? Nice to see you. Maybe acting on stage as a character for so long you forget you're a different person off stage. Yeah, that's one way of putting it, isn't it? And that different person off stage is one that you have never known. And in fact, it's not a person either. It's not a human. It's something else entirely. In fact, one of the ways of finding the true self, there's a couple of exercises that we teach. One's called subject becomes object. That's a meditation technique. The other one is called what am I exercise. It's an exercise called what am I? And this is where you continually ask yourself this question, what am I? And you go through your whole experience, everything that you're experiencing in the present moment, and trying to label things as me or not me. And if you can focus on it, it's not you, because that's an object of meditation. It's not the subject. And you have to go through everything in your experience trying to find what you actually are. And when you find it, or you don't find it, you realize it, it's completely different to what you were looking for. It's not a person. It's non-physical. It's non-physical awareness. That's what you're looking for. Can you describe the last part of Kundalini awakening, or K3, K4? Yeah, sure. So K3, so there's three energies in the Kundalini awakening phase: K1, K2, K3. K1 is this one that goes up the spine, the central spinal channel, through the chakras. K2 comes down from the ninth chakra and ends its journey at the crown chakra, in the middle of the head, at the location of the pineal gland, the crown chakra. And section 3 is the movement of K3 from the crown chakra to the bindu. It's in the head, by the way. It doesn't curve around the skin. I just can't get my finger in there, basically. But it goes from the crown chakra to the bindu, and the bindu is towards the back of the head, in the energy body we're talking about here. So K1, when it goes up to the bindu, that's where it ends its journey. It waits at the bindu. It waits for K3, because K3 actually comes down and mixes with K1. K3 and K1 mix together and they turn into K4. That's the end of the Kundalini awakening phase. So let me just back up a little bit and talk about K3, because you asked about K3 and K4. K3 is a section in the Kundalini system that we call the migration of identity. In fact, let me just name the other systems. The first section, section 1, that's the chakras. Section 2 is universal light descent. And section 3, migration of identity. Now, this movement of K3 backwards to the bindu corresponds directly to how much egoic identity is still there, because the egoic identity is disappearing through this phase. The egoic structure, the psychological structure which produces identity, is disappearing. And this is the stickiest bit of the whole awakening phase. This is the hardest bit, and it's always right at the end. The ego is rebelling at this point. The ego doesn't want to go. So you keep falling back into the ego, and then you pull yourself out of it, and you're able to see the egoic identity from afar. You can disentangle yourself from it to some degree. You can see that it's not you. You start to see how it's constructed. But then you fall back in and you re-identify with all those thoughts and emotions and basically the mind starts kicking off again. You've fallen back into the ego, and it's a frustrating time because you keep flip-flopping back and forth like that until K3 has completely finished its journey to the Bindu, and then no more of that. There's still the lower mind, so it's not like negative thoughts and emotions disappear, but the identity, the egoic identity has gone. And then K4, anyway, so K1 and K3 mix together, go through the Bindu, turn into K4, and then they start percolating into the lower mind energy framework. And then they start the energetic transformation of self-realization itself. Is it common to experience tingling or electrical sensations in the scalp and muscle twitching? Yes, that can be part of it as well. These electrical sensations in the scalp is often a sign that K2 is coming down. K2 is in section 2, universal light descent. So it starts its journey at the 9th chakra, and sometimes you see this white light above your head. That's the 9th chakra. And it starts coming down, and you can get all sorts of energy sensations coming down over your face. But these little prickly, quite often blissful electrical feelings on the top of your head, on the top of your scalp, that is quite often a sign of that as well. And muscle twitches, yeah, insane twitching, involuntary movements, that's all part of Kundalini symptoms as well. Does the unification cycle mean you feel no joy or no grief, or is it more positive? Okay, so the unification cycle will be the end of positive and negative. So the whole of the self-realization cycle is a balancing of the duality in you, in your individual self, and then seeing the unity, seeing through the duality, the falsity of duality, and seeing the unity of the universe, of the source of the universe. But really the source itself becomes self-aware at that point. And this is a growing thing over the whole of the cycles, to be honest with you. But the negative cycle is where you're feeling negative, put simply, and then the positive cycle is when you're feeling positive, and then the unification cycle is when they blend together and disappear completely. No more positive and negative. Now that doesn't mean that you stop feeling stuff at all, because there's certain things you feel still. Now, for example, peace. Lovely, thanks for that. Peace is something you'll always feel. Infinite deep peace goes along with universal awareness, because peace and awareness are the same thing. Peace is actually the background substrate in which everything happens, in which all of your experiences happen. So you always feel that deep, deep peace. And then there's some more things that you still feel, but they're not strictly part of duality, even though it sounds like they're positive. We call it ekatosha. Ekatosha is like an addition on top of that infinite peace. And there's 4 different types that you feel. Unconditional love, you will always feel that. Bliss, you will always feel that. Joy, you will always feel that. And enthusiasm, you will always feel that. Now, during the unification cycle, all of that starts to actually become part of your background state of being, just like peace is, which is why it's not actually part of duality, positive and negative. In fairness, you're sharing opinions, beliefs, not facts, my friend. Yeah, well, fair enough. Now, I would pick up on a couple of things there. I'm definitely not sharing any beliefs, because as you go through Kundalini Awakening and self-realization, you have no more beliefs after that. Now, and I'll give you an example. If I told you today that reincarnation exists because I have the memories, then that is evidence. It's subjective evidence, of course. It's not evidence to you, but it's evidence for me. But tomorrow, if my higher mind instead said through me, reincarnation doesn't exist, then I would just say it. I would say exactly that, because there's no belief. There's no lower mind belief, because if there was a belief, then it would resist that change. So as you go through Kundalini Awakening and self-realization, the identity structure disappears completely and beliefs go along with it. That's one thing. Now, secondly, about facts. You're absolutely right that people can say things, and of course, you don't have to believe it. Absolutely not. And I would encourage you not to believe it. This is one thing we always say to people again and again and again. Do not believe everything that people are saying. And that includes what I'm saying. What we say is, you go away and do the work and you find the answers for yourself. Now, it's good to research. It's good to listen to as many people as possible, educate oneself, but ultimately only you can find the answers. And the truth is within everybody. The truth is within you. So all you have to do is stop looking outside of yourself and actually turn your gaze inwards and look inside, and you will find the truth and you will experience these truths yourselves. But you're absolutely right. You shouldn't just believe people. You should go and find out for yourself. Hi, Dominique. My daughter is here and she says hi. Well, hello to you too. Nice one. Nice to meet you. Reincarnation does not end unless we choose it. Well, have a think about who is doing the choosing there. Who is the you in that scenario? Is it the lower mind? Is it the egoic identity? Is it the higher mind, the soul? Is it the source of the universe? Because all of those things I've just said is all part of the human system. So who is choosing exactly? And what do you think about the whole of the universe? Is it all predetermined? Because if it's all infinitely determined, there is no choice anyway, is there? And we would say it is. The universe is 100% infinitely predetermined or deterministic. I'm confused. How to handle and react to genocide that happens in the world? Cannot focus on self. Well, if you see things happening around you that should not be happening, then always change them if you can, of course. Let's not talk about your example there exactly, but anything around you, even in your life. If things are happening that you think shouldn't be happening, then you should always try and change that, 100%. However, if you see things that are happening that you cannot do anything about, then you have to accept them. And that is the very start of the journey of surrender. Because if you don't accept them, but you can't do anything about it, then in your mind, you are just resisting. You are just self-harming, causing yourself more and more pain that is needless. And that's how karma works. We produce karma in the mind. It's the thought patterns in the mind which produce karma, because karma is emotional memory. So if we're constantly winding ourselves up in our head, needlessly, we are producing future negative emotions for ourselves. I kept asking my higher mind my purpose, and she said to stop asking. Excellent. Yeah, so basically what your higher mind is saying there is patience. It will come when it's ready. And that is a typical thing in the lower mind, is impatience, isn't it? Impatience and desire. That's one of those things that have to fall away along the journey of Kundalini awakening and self-realization. Hi, so not everyone has a Kundalini awakening. Yes, so that's a good point. So that's absolutely true. Not everybody on the planet will have a Kundalini awakening in this particular incarnation. No, it doesn't work like that. Not people don't become self-realized on like the whole world altogether. It's an evolution. The planet is an evolution. Life is an evolution. Self-realization and spiritual evolution is an evolution. So people are on all sorts of different levels of spiritual development. And you can tell that quite easily looking out the window into the world. There's people of all sorts of different spiritual development level, of course. Everybody will get to Kundalini awakening and self-realization, just not all at the same time. It's like a big conveyor belt of souls all moving towards that end goal. So there have been people in the past who have become self-realized. There are people becoming self-realized now, and they will carry on and on and on. In fact, it's getting more and more exponential the more we get into the global awakening. So it's going to become much, much more common from now on. How long does it take on average for K1 to travel upwards? Well, that really does depend on quite a few things. The K1 journey, or let's say the whole of the Kundalini awakening phase, can take any time at all. You know, I know some people who have had a Kundalini awakening in their previous life, and then it's carried on, and they've carried it on to their next incarnation to finish it off. I know some other people who have taken decades over the Kundalini awakening phase, you know, 20, 30 years. I also know people have done it very, very quickly as well. And I think that, say, last century, in the 20th century, I think that it was sort of more decades. But now, the more people we are seeing going through this process, it's quickening up quite clearly. And we see a lot of people going through it, and we teach a lot. And there's a lot of people in Aya who are going through it. And I would say that the average now is probably a couple of years, or has been for the last sort of 5-10 years or so. The average seems to be about a couple of years. So it's quickening right up as we're getting into the global awakening. But, you know, I have seen one person go through it in one day before that whole Kundalini awakening phase. So there's no real time frame. It just depends if you know about it quite often, or if you're getting help with it. Is it possible to have a random, spontaneous Kundalini awakening? Yes, well, absolutely. In fact, a natural Kundalini awakening is a random, spontaneous Kundalini awakening. From the perspective of a lower mind, that is. You know, the soul, the higher mind, of course, has planned it. But it comes as a surprise to you, consciously, because you weren't expecting it. So a natural one is always like that, to be honest with you. But it's also possible to have a random, spontaneous Kundalini awakening when somebody is not ready for it as well. It can happen accidentally sometimes. It can be activated by trauma sometimes, emotional trauma, or even physical trauma as well, which causes emotional trauma. What will you say about the opening of the third eye and where it occurs in this process? All right, so the third eye, which is the brow chakra, can be open or closed. It can't be blocked, though, just to clear that one up. The emotion chakras are the only chakras that get blocked up. That's the root up to the throat, those 5 emotion chakras. they can get blocked up with negative emotional energy. But the brow chakra cannot, because it's not an emotion regulator. And same with the crown chakra, can't get blocked up. But the brow chakra can be open or closed. But technically speaking, it's not really relevant to a Kundalini awakening, because a Kundalini awakening can happen and that K1 energy can go past the throat chakra, past the brow chakra and into the Bindu, whether the brow chakra is open or closed. So technically speaking, it's not like the K1 passes it and then opens up the brow chakra exactly. The brow chakra can be open way before Kundalini awakening. It can be open or closed way before. You can be way back into the journey of spiritual evolution with 500 lifetimes to go before you get to the point of Kundalini awakening, and have an open brow chakra at that point. It's perfectly possible. And I will just add, because it is true that your intuition and perception tends to ramp right up when you go through a Kundalini awakening. That's absolutely true. But that's not necessarily your brow chakra opening more. That is your higher mind letting in more, basically. Dutta, you teach Kundalini Ascension. Why do you not like talking about your personal experience? Well, it's not that I don't like talking about it. I don't mind talking about it, but is it really going to help anyone? And the answer is not so much, to be honest with you. That's just more sort of interest, isn't it? It's not going to help as much as actually talking about the process itself in general and getting as much information out there as possible. And to be honest with you, it does feel strange talking about oneself as well. That is true. But I don't mind talking about it if there are specific questions about it. How long does this process take to complete? So it depends which process you're talking about there. Let's take it to the extreme and say the process of spiritual evolution. Well, that's how many lifetimes, we couldn't put a number to it. But the Kundalini awakening phase, as I just mentioned, can take decades, or it can take a very small number of years. That's just the awakening phase, the Kundalini system, which actually awakens and opens up a channel to the 9th chakra, the source of the universe. But then you go out of the Kundalini awakening phase and into the phases of self-realization. And then you've got 7 years negative cycle. Then you've got 7 years positive cycle. Then you've got 7 years unification cycle. And then after that, you go to a plateau, and then you live as an avatar for a long period of time. And self-realization never really ends, because you are always getting closer and closer to the source. And eventually your life, the life cycle of your soul will end, and the energies of your soul, your vehicle, will absorb into the source. But your awareness lives on forever, of course, because awareness is infinite and eternal. So you will never end. So that's kind of why self-realization is an endless process. There is no end to it, really. After dealing with so many toxic men, I keep thinking most of the men hate women, and it makes me angry. How do I change my mindset on that? Because I know there are good and bad people. Yeah, okay. So basically what we would teach, this is a part of self-healing, really, isn't it? Now, there are triggers in the world which trigger our emotional cycle. And usually those triggers are outside of us, aren't they? So quite often you can't do anything about those triggers. I mean, sometimes you can do something. If something's happening to you that needs to stop, yes, you can do something about it, and you should. However, if they are just, like you were mentioning, just general triggers about the world around you, quite often you can't do anything about them. Well, what's happening there is that you are letting something outside of you dictate what happens inside of you. And the thing is about your emotional cycle is that you can do something about what is going on inside you, even if you can't do anything about what is going on outside of you. And you do that through self-healing techniques. So what I would suggest to you is actually to use various self-healing techniques to try and reduce that triggering aspect that you're going through. And I'll name a couple just to start with. Chakra breathing or general breath work, pranayama yoga, is going to help you unblock blockages in the energy body. Because if you have blockages in your chakras, then they act like grenades. So emotional reactions get inflated 2 or 3 times when you've got a blockage in one of these emotion chakras. So just by doing chakra breathing and removing your blockages, you halve the problem down immediately, and it becomes much better. And there's lots of other stuff you can do as well, like emotional meditation. So whenever you get triggered by something in the present moment, then you can learn emotional meditation. And whenever you get triggered, whenever you feel that anger starting to rise, it's like an alarm bell. Right, time for emotional meditation. And this is when you focus, you find the feeling in your body, that negative fizzing feeling of that anger, wherever you're feeling it, whether it's in the head area or the chest area, wherever it is, you find it and you meditate on it. You focus all of your attention on it. You meditate, you meditate, you meditate. You don't let your mind stray anywhere else. You bring it closer to you. You're feeling intently that feeling. So you're letting it be, you're letting it flow, but you're focusing on it. What that does is it stops the mind, because meditation stops the mind from thinking. And it's the thinking which is fueling more of that emotion. So emotional meditation in the moment that you're getting triggered is very important. And what you find is that it just fizzles away very quickly. That reaction just fizzles away because you've stopped the mind stream. And there's lots of other self-healing techniques that you can do. There's a rewire your mind exercise, mantra meditation to rewire your mind and things like that. And of course, the journey of meditation, I will always encourage the journey of meditation, because that is going to calm the whole system down, and it's going to smooth out all of that psychology which is producing all of those triggers. So there's lots of things you can do about that. Does plant medicine spark these experiences? By the way, I'm scooting over some messages, but yeah, thank you for your messages there. But does plant medicine spark these experiences? Yeah, this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because there are lots of hallucinogens. I think that's what you're talking about, right? Hallucinogens. There are lots of hallucinogens which can give you certain spiritual experiences. And quite often they do that through linking you up with the astral dimensions. So yes, some hallucinogens can sort of instigate a connection to the astral dimension. Some hallucinogens can even reduce the false self, give you a momentary experience of unity sometimes as well. But I would say I wouldn't encourage this, because it's always going to be temporary. It's not a quick fix, is all I'm saying here. So you can get some experiences, but I think probably the damaging aspects of it probably outweigh the positive aspects of it, to be honest with you. And that's the same with taking any type of drugs, really. To be fair, there's always side effects, isn't there, really? And and it's certainly not a quick fix towards spirituality. So the thing is with spirituality, there's no magic pill. You're not going to jump. You're not going to jump in spiritual evolution. Your soul has got to do the work. It's got to grow the Kundalini system. So in that respect, it doesn't get people closer to the goal. Exactly. What is the difference between a Kundalini awakening and spiritual psychosis? Well, in some cases, not much, to be honest with you. Okay, so there's different situations to talk about here, really. So let's just talk about a normal Kundalini awakening, which happens when somebody is completely ready for it. Okay, the Kundalini awakening, when you're ready for it, can sometimes be quite a tough thing to go through, and quite often you get some emotional turmoil as you go through it, and you start seeing things. You start seeing all sorts of things. Your astral senses start opening up. You start feeling other people's energy. You start maybe seeing beings and stuff in the astral dimensions. Now, what's the definition of psychosis? Well, probably something along the lines of seeing things that are not there, seeing and believing things that are not there. So, you know, the definitions sort of blend in together. But the thing is with the Kundalini awakening is that quite often you are seeing those things. You're just starting to become aware of these things. And then also there's tough times to go through, like the disappearing identity and losing your way. That can sometimes be accompanied by depressive moments and ups and downs psychologically and emotionally. So, you know, it can be a really challenging time, that's for sure. That's a natural Kundalini awakening when somebody is ready for it. I should add, by the way, that's, you know, that's happens to some people. Some people don't actually feel all those things. Some people sail through it and it's lovely. Lots of bliss and joy and stuff like that. So it just depends. Now when psychosis really bites is when somebody has gone through or going through a Kundalini awakening which is premature. If somebody is not ready for it, this is where it can cause some really big problems. And this is what I would probably call spiritual psychosis, in your words. Now, when somebody's not ready for a Kundalini awakening, sometimes they can have just an accidental one. And that is very unfortunate. Or sometimes people are doing Kundalini yoga on themselves and are awakening it manually. That's a big problem. Or sometimes they've gone to a practitioner or a center to get it awakened. But the problem is if they weren't ready for that, if the Kundalini system was only half grown up the spine, there's going to be awful problems, because this is a system of emotional intelligence in the energy body. So it allows human beings to have emotional intelligence. So if you mess with it, it's going to cause some sort of emotional problem. Now, you can get a Kundalini rupture. This is one of the worst things that can happen. If somebody has awakens their Kundalini manually, K1 will awaken out of the Kundalini bulb, which is underneath the root chakra. It will go up the central spinal channel, the Sushumna, and then if there's nowhere for it to go, it will rupture inside the energy body. And that is what causes these horrible symptoms: emotional turmoil, just putting it mildly, complete psychosis. Everything just goes out of the window, basically. And quite often nervous system issues to the point of hospitalization, or being bedridden, or, you know, just being completely incapacitated with nervous system problems. So I'm not overreacting there. I'm not exaggerating. I've known of people going through that. And it's not a good idea, and it's not fun. So please don't mess with your Kundalini. That's the message that I want to give there. Don't mess with your Kundalini. Don't awaken it manually. Let it do its thing. It will awaken when it's ready. Just so you know, I've got to go in about 5 minutes. Is there a book that we can explain deeply the process of Kundalini awakening that you can recommend? Well, to be honest with you, I think that ancient descriptions of Kundalini are becoming outdated, so I don't really want to recommend anything. The reason why they're becoming outdated is because even though it's an ancient practice, it's an ancient knowledge, things are changing. Things are changing. Self-realization is evolving. Self-realization, Kundalini awakening is changing as we go into the global awakening. So this is what we've noticed, is that everything's quickening up. And these cycles that I'm talking about, the negative, the positive, the unification cycle, these cycles are something which is quite new. You're not going to find that in the literature. And so many books out there are based on the literature that exists already. However, we are in the middle of writing a little series of books called the Kundalini Code. So if you want to have a look at that when that's done, then please do feel free. Hey, Chris, how you doing? All right? Nice to see you. By the way, Chris, I sent you a couple of messages. If you wouldn't mind having a look. What was your experience through self-realization? I think it's too broad. That's too broad a category, really. But I guess I could mention one bit. What triggered it for me was a fear of public speaking, in fact. That's what triggered my self-healing journey, or made me focus a lot on my self-healing journey. I learned all the spiritual stuff from my mother when I was a teenager, because she was very into Advaita Vedanta philosophy, and she was the one that had a Kundalini awakening in her previous life and finished it off when she was 14. So she was already into all that. So she taught me all the spiritual practice and stuff from an early age, meditation, breath work, etc., through my teens. But really, it was the fear of public speaking that I found that I had, which actually forced me into the self-healing journey, really. And this is where I found the ego. I found how the fear of public speaking was perpetuating itself in the ego, in the false self. For example, and I had to do public speaking as part of my job. So every time I had one to do, and it was probably every week or every couple of weeks, I would spend a load of time worrying about it in the mind, of course. And then I would do it. It would be horrible. And then I'd spend the next week worrying about how it went. So this is when I started to see through what was going on here. I was perpetuating the ego through thinking, laying down all those thought patterns in the mind, laying down all that conditioning in the mind. And that was actually perpetuating the ego itself. And then after that, I learned about Kundalini, because I had all these Kundalini symptoms going on. Took myself to hospital, of course, as everybody tends to do when they get these Kundalini symptoms, and nothing was found. And that'll do for now, I think. Right, I'm gonna have to go. It's 7 o'clock. So thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for your messages. We'll be back on Wednesday. So this is the Kundalini Code. If you're new here, this is Kundalini Code. We talk about Kundalini awakenings, Kundalini symptoms, the journey of spiritual evolution, the journey of healing, which is the journey towards self-realization. That's what healing is all about. The ultimate healing is self-realization. It is the source of the universe, which is healing itself by gaining self-awareness. The source of the universe, gaining self-awareness through you, through conscious beings in the universe. That is what existence is doing. It's becoming self-realized through you. So see you on Wednesday, hopefully. Nice one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.